All right, let's dive into our first source for today. It's an editorial piece really taking a look at India's water future and, well, suggesting a pretty important new way forward.
Hmm. And it seems to zero in on the huge water management challenges India's facing, but it also, interestingly, puts it in a global context that feels very relevant right now.
Yeah, it points out that 2025 is actually a big year for water and glaciers globally. You've got the World Water Day theme, the International Year of Glaciers Preservation,
Right, and the start of a decade of action on cryospheric
the
science.
cryosphere. That's the frozen parts of the Earth, the glaciers and ice caps.
Mm.
And they call these mountain sources water towers, don't they?
Exactly. And the thing is, the changing cryosphere or, melting glaciers, different snow patterns, it really shakes up water availability downstream. And at the same time, we're also in the middle of the UN Decade of Ocean Science, running through to 2030.
Okay, and that focuses on ocean issues like pollution, coastal hazards, sea level rise, biodiversity loss too, I imagine.
Precisely. So you have this global focus way up high in the mountains and these critical worries about the oceans down below. And the article's main point, the sort of crux of it, is that we often miss the vital link between them, the upstream-downstream connection.
That seems key. It's saying that what we do upstream, building dams, diverting water, pumping out groundwater, pollution, it fundamentally changes how fresh water flows all the way down.
Yeah, and that altered flow then hits the coastal areas and even the open ocean, usually in a negative way.
It sounds obvious when you lay it out like that, but clearly that's not how water is usually managed. Which brings us to this source to sea idea, the S2S approach.
Yes, S2S. It's not totally new, actually proposed back in 2012 in something called the Manila Declaration. It's basically a call for, well, integrated management, looking at land, freshwater, coasts, and oceans all together.
Kind of a ridge to reef idea.
That's a good way to put it. Seeing the whole system, from the mountain ridge down to the reef. And there are organizations like the Stockholm International Water Institute, SIWI, and IUCN hosting platforms now to push this forward.
So the core idea is treating that whole water journey as like one single system.
That's the fundamental shift, yeah. It challenges the old way of slicing things up, river authorities here, groundwater boards there, coastal zone management, ocean rules, all separate boxes.
Right. And didn't a UN university group suggest overcoming these divides?
They did back in 2012. They suggested using a socio-ecological system scale for analysis and solutions.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Socio-ecological system scale.
It means you don't just look at the water system, the river, the aquifer, the coast in isolation. You look at it intertwined with the human systems using and managing it. So you consider the hydrology, sure, but also the governance, the policies, the economic, social impacts, even across borders if it's a shared river.
Got it. So applying that S2S lens to India, the article highlights some pretty serious problems.
Oh, the challenges are massive. Huge differences in where the water is, floods in one place, drought in another, unequal access is a big one, and pollution just soaring. The CPCB found 311 polluted river stretches.
Wow, that's staggering.
It is. And so much untreated waste, solid waste, sewage just going straight into the water, then layer on climate change, messing with rainfall and glaciers, plus growing conflicts over water. It's a tough picture.
And the economic hit is real too. That NT-IOG study from 2018, 600 million people facing water stress, potential 6% GDP loss.
Exactly. And the World Resources Institute flags India as extremely water stressed. That hits agriculture, the whole economy, hard.
A huge part of that stress must be groundwater. The article mentions that.
Absolutely crucial. India uses, on average, about 60.5% of its replenishable groundwater. But some states, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, are over 100%. They're pulling out more than goes back in year after year.
That's just unsustainable.
Totally. And over 60% of irrigation and 85% of drinking water rely on it. Quality's dropping. Many areas are critical. It's a major vulnerability.
So with all these problems and India having national water policies since the 80s, why hasn't this S2S approach really taken hold?
Well, the article suggests two main things. One is just the deeply embedded, fragmented way water is managed, by sector. The other is the sheer complexity of governance in India, especially for rivers crossing state lines. Coordinating local, state, national governments. It's inherently difficult.
So despite policies and committees, S2S is still kind of on the fringes.
That seems to be the case. Policy updates have happened, but that fundamental shift in framework, not so much. The article only mentions a couple of potential S2S case studies being looked at, one on nutrient management in Delhi, another for the huge Indo-Gangetic Basin.
So the call to action here is pretty clear then.
Yes, A strong push for that S2S approach, using that social ecological system viewpoint, really linking the freshwater goal, SDG 6, with the marine goal, SDG 14, especially on integrated management and tackling land-based pollution. It means getting all stakeholders involved, closing that gap between the science, the policy, and what actually happens on the ground, and fostering innovation across these usually separate areas.
Okay, that gives us a really good handle on the water challenges and this integrated solution being proposed. Let's switch gears now to our second source, another editorial, this one focusing on India's food safety standards.
Right. This piece sort of tracks India's journey with food safety. It acknowledges, real progress, but also points out some significant gaps and challenges that still exist, very relevant today.
It starts way back with the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act of 1954. How did that work?
Well, that older system was pretty basic. Food was either adulterated or not, very black and white. And crucially, it didn't really matter how much of a contaminant was there, it treated them all the same. No concept of risk based on quantity or exposure.
A bit simplistic, perhaps. So the big change came with the Food Safety and Standards Act in 2006 and setting up the FSSAI.
Absolutely. That was the pivot point. India moved towards a risk-based approach, taking cues from international standards like Codex Alimentarius. This focuses more on the actual likelihood and severity of harm.
And that led to setting things like MRL's maximum residue limits for pesticides and safe levels for additives, right, based on scientific risk assessment.
Exactly. And the article does note real progress. By 2020, India's standards were largely aligned with advanced countries. That's quite an achievement.
It sounds like a big step forward. But the article suggests adopting international standards also revealed some weaknesses.
It did, particularly in the, let's say, the foundation of the risk assessment itself.
Like relying too much on international data, perhaps.
That's a key point it raises. Many safety standards, like MRLs or ADI's acceptable daily intakes, are based on studies and dietary data from other countries. But that data might not perfectly match India's unique eating habits, farming practices, how food is cooked, or environmental factors.
And the lack of a total diet study in India. The article flags that as a major issue.
It's a fundamental gap for accurate risk assessment. A total diet study, or TDS, looks at the food people actually eat, prepare it as they normally would, to estimate total exposure to chemicals from the whole diet. Without that comprehensive picture, setting limits relies on more fragmented data, which weakens the scientific underpinning.
Okay, so challenges in the science itself, but also in communicating that science.
Oh, definitely. This is a huge hurdle. Trying to explain technical terms like MRLs or ADIs, measured in tiny amounts like parts per million or billion,
Yeah.
it's tough for the average consumer to grasp.
Yeah, the article had that example of a pesticide MRL changing from 0.01 to zero point 0.1 millig kilogram. Scientifically sound maybe, but people see the number go up and think it's less safe.
Exactly. It causes confusion, sometimes even distrust, when the scientific rationale isn't clearly understood.
And the article uses a really interesting case study for this communication and science versus perception issue, MSG monosodium glutamate.
Yes, this MSG example is fascinating. Globally, the scientific consensus set by expert bodies like JSC decades ago is that MSG is safe. They even gave it an ABI not specified status back in '87, meaning it's considered so low in toxicity you don't need a numerical limit. Most countries accept this.
But India's approach is different.
Well, India allows MSG in many foods now, but it still mandates a warning label saying it's unsafe for infants.
And the article argues that's misleading?
Highly misleading, yes. Because glutamate, the thing in MSG, occurs naturally in loads of common healthy foods, tomatoes, mushrooms, cheese, even breast milk. It's chemically identical whether it's added or naturally present. So that warning label, despite global scientific agreement on safety, just creates unnecessary fear and confusion.
Wow. So that MSG label really highlights the struggle India faces in aligning regulations with current science, instead of sticking with older perceptions or fears.
Precisely. It's a prime example of that tension.
So how does the article suggest India moves forward? What are the steps to strengthen the system?
Several key things. First, a big one. Invest in India-specific research. Proper toxicology studies for the Indian population, and crucially, conduct that comprehensive total diet study.
Right. Get the foundational science right for India, and then tackle the communication.
Exactly. Improve risk communications, simplify the messages, use clearer language, and importantly, remove misleading or confusing labels based on outdated ideas like the MSG one. Also, boosting the skills of risk assessors through training.
And keeping the standards themselves current.
Yes, regular reviews and updates based on new science done transparently. The article really stresses building public trust through open engagement with everyone, industry, consumers, scientists, the public.
So ultimately, it's about letting the evidence, not fear, drive decisions. Finding that balance between solid science and clear communication so consumers are protected and informed without needless worry.
That sums it up perfectly, balancing rigor with effective communication.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift to our final source today. This one's from the Ground Zero section, taking us down to the coast of Kerala, where a recent incident seems to have stirred up some deeper anxieties.
Yes, this article uses a specific event, a container ship sinking, as a starting point to explore much longer-standing concerns within the local community, especially among the fisherfolk whose lives depend on that sea.
The incident itself was the container ship MSC Elsa 3 sinking off Kerala on May 25th. Crew rescued, thankfully.
Yes, the crew was safe. But the ship was carrying hundreds of containers, some with hazardous materials plus a lot of fuel oil and diesel. Pretty quickly, debris in containers started washing ashore, and oil patches were seen near the wreck.
The article mentions an 80-year-old fisherman, E. Srinivasan, remembering the 2004 tsunami and how vital the seawall built then still is. That really brings home the vulnerability of these coastal communities.
It does. The initial government reaction was banning fishing in a 20 nautical mile zone and offering some compensation rights and a monthly payment.
But the fisherfolk didn't feel that was enough.
No, the article makes that clear. Leaders like Srinivasan and Binu Panan are quoted saying it was inadequate compared to past support, suggesting a much higher amount was needed to cover their losses.
That dissatisfaction is telling. The ship itself, 27 years old, Liberian flag, developed a list and sank off the Thotapalli. Quite dramatic.
Very. And it seems the initial worry wasn't just the sinking, but the pollution fallout.
Right. Once the pollution scare hit, fish demand apparently dropped. The National Green Tribunal even warned about the hazardous cargo calcium carbide, oil, and the potential impact on marine life, water quality, maybe even reaching Lakshadweep.
Yeah, serious concerns. Kerala's chief minister did try to calm fears about fish safety, and the shipping company MSC hired a salvage firm to handle cleanup and recovery efforts.
So steps are being taken for this specific incident. But the article's main thrust is that the fisherfolk's worries go way beyond just this one ship.
Exactly. This sinking seems to have just thrown existing, deeper problems into sharp relief.
What kind of problems?
Well, Srinivasan and another local, K.C. Srikumar, are more worried about the hundreds of tons of mineral sand they see being mined from the coast daily. They link this directly to lower fish catches and the sea eating away at the land.
And other pollution besides the ship.
Absolutely. People like Panan and Srikumar point out that this ship's waste is just the latest layer. They talk about chronic dumping of chemicals, sewage, untreated waste from factories, businesses, homes, all going into the sea, damaging the fishery and the whole ecosystem.
Sounds like a cumulative burden. And practical issues too, like waste not being cleared from beaches and not knowing the wreck's exact location.
Yes, those are immediate livelihood concerns needing to avoid snagging expensive fishing gear on submerged containers or debris. The article also mentions frustration with some media coverage causing public panic about fish safety, even without major fish kill reports, though it does note one seller saw prices recover quickly.
Still, the underlying fear seems profound. K.C. Srikumar worrying about a Somalia-like situation due to unregulated exploitation and pollution. That's strong language.
It is. And then there's this specific concern about plastic nurdles, raised by VT Sebastian. Tiny plastic pellets spilled from container.
Uh-oh. What's the worry there?
He fears these tons of tiny, colorless nurdles will get into the sea, fish will eat them thinking they're food, and then humans eating those fish could face health risks. He says people are already avoiding fish because of it, hitting incomes hard.
And the fishing unions are making demands.
Yes, the KMAV union wants compensation from MSC. They're questioning if the ship was even seaworthy and demanding accountability under international rules. They're also pushing for ships to operate much further offshore, maybe 50 kilometers out, to reduce risks.
What about the official investigation and assessment?
Initial findings from DG Shipping pointed to a technical failure with ballast water. 3 committees were set up to assess damages. The official line for now is no major cause for alarm regarding fish kills, but they stress the need to salvage the cargo and oil. The State Pollution Control Board is testing samples. Early ones away from the wreck were okay, but analysis near the site is ongoing.
That quote about the plastic nurdles, though. Danger lurks in the form of many tons of colorless plastic nurdles. That really sticks.
It does. It shows how an immediate crisis connects to these less visible, potentially long-term threats to the ecosystem and people's livelihoods.
Thinking back to our first article on the source-to-sea approach, this Kerala situation feels like a real-world example of that interconnectedness, doesn't it?
Mm,
You've got sand mining on land, sewage and industrial waste from the coast, and an accident at sea, all impacting the same marine system.
absolutely. It perfectly illustrates that complex web. You have land-based sources, coastal sources, maritime sources, all converging and impacting the sea and the people who depend on it.
It really drives home the point. The immediate response to the ship sinking is necessary. Of course, the cleanup, the compensation. But the voices in this article, the fisherfolk, are highlighting these much deeper chronic issues. The sand mining, the ongoing pollution. How do we balance dealing with the urgent crisis while also tackling those fundamental long-term worries that the local community lives with every day? That's certainly something to chew on.
It really is. Addressing the symptoms versus tackling the root causes within that whole connected system.
Thank you for listening. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.